get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Dylan Staniul of Burnkit. And Dylan, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, some of the fan favorites, we had Ian Garlic on. He started Video Case Story and basically helps capture customer stories for companies. It was interesting because he grew up in an entrepreneurial household. His dad had a restaurant, and you'll like this, Dylan, because you're super creative. His dad had live dolphins in the restaurant. Now, Ian lives in Orlando. That's still strange to have live dolphins in a restaurant. But at the time of that restaurant was in Wisconsin. So can you imagine having live you go to a restaurant in Wisconsin and seeing live dolphins? I can't. Maybe Vegas, Orlando.
The dolphins weren't on the menu, were they?
No, exactly.
No.
They were not breeding them, or they were not on the menu.
Even in Wisconsin, that's out of line.
I just like hearing creative ideas in marketing, and we'll talk about your creative ideas for branding, but that was an interesting one. Another one was Adi Clevitt. Her agency specializes in SOPs. Then, the non-sexy things that make things work. So people call her when they want an easy button for their SOPs and they want to smooth out client process. And we'll talk about process on this one, but client process, hiring process, any operational things. And we geeked out on our favorite productivity tools. And so I highly recommend that episode as well. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, which is the most important, the accountability, and also the full execution. So we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host so they can create amazing content, develop amazing relationships, and most importantly, focus on running their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give first and keep giving to my relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you definitely should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Dylan Staniul. He's a branding veteran. He's principal at Burnkit. And Burnkit is the design studio. They founded in 2000, right? 2000 to me doesn't seem like that long ago. But when you're like, wait, we're a couple decades in. His insightful, we're going to talk about his creative process, kind of investigates and explores how your brand can be uniquely expressed. And Dylan has also judged some of the most prestigious design competitions for publications, including communication arts, applied arts and strategy. And like I said, he's been doing this work for a couple decades. So Dylan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. 2000 for young designers, that's ancient history. But we've been doing it a long time. I have a dad story for you if you want. You want to start off with something oblique like that? But since you mentioned that, my dad was in sales. And so I always remember that aspect about being able to communicate with people. So even though, I took a different path and ended up in design and brand, I always tell young designers, speaking of them, to not underestimate the power of being able to sell what it is you're interested in talking about. You might have the greatest ideas, but if you can't convince anybody about a brand idea that you have, then it may as well be in the garbage. So you have to live up to that side of your skill set as well. So just a little something that I think about every day.
Dylan, what is some key advice your dad gave you about selling?
He said, well, first thing he said when you start your own business, he goes, get an American Express card. That's the first thing he told me to do. But
even if you're in Canada?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's a worldwide thing.
They need a Canadian Express card. Come on.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Don't leave home without it, right? But he wasn't a preacher in that way. It was more through osmosis. I could just see things that were important. And
what did you do? Yeah, what did you see?
He was a broker for different kinds of food lines and food service, and so a lot of selling, a lot of face to face, a lot of calls, a lot of that kind of thing. So I just learned that you have to be ready to go and meet a lot of people and not be afraid of rejection sometimes, and that helps me every day. When you want to talk about something that's unusual or present concepts that maybe clients haven't even imagined, like you have to be ready to have some feedback that isn't always perfect, and that's part of the process. That's what they're engaging with you for, is to go somewhere that otherwise they would have done it themselves. So.
How do you? This is a great topic. How do you internalize rejection?
Yeah,
because it happens so much all around us, and I notice some people really it affects them, and some people it just rolls off of them. So how do you internally, when you get rejection, what are you thinking about, and how do you handle that internally?
I think it's really something that is super important to balance well. You have to have self-awareness. You have to understand when something you've done maybe isn't right. And so when you get that rejection, that means something. But you also have to balance that with a confidence of will that allows you to try something else. That may be even harder. Like fighting for one idea is one thing, but picking yourself back up and trying something else, that's another aspect of confidence and creativity. You have to be able to do that all the time. You can never be down. It's like a ping pong match. Like you can't just expect your first shot is going to be the one. You're there for the long haul in these relationships with a creative partner. So I remember that. I think about that every day. Yeah, that's super important. Yeah.
I think of some of the most successful people I know are super persistent, and sometimes they don't even hear rejection. Like they don't even see it as rejection sometimes. Like they hear and they get a no, and you just see them move forward as if there wasn't a no almost sometimes. Right. So I don't know if that's how you saw, or how your dad, you saw him, or what he said, or what you saw him, how he handled rejection.
I think there's something to that. I think that's it. You have to let certain things roll off your back, and you've got your eye on the ball. And if that isn't going to get you there, there's another way. There's another path to get there. And that might mean deciding what a good relationship is, let's say in work, as a client agent relationship, but it also might mean another way to get to that one idea that you have in mind for that client, or it might mean deciding you're not going to work with that particular partner anymore. It might not be a good relationship. So you have to recognize those things too and be ready to move on. But it's definitely not an all or nothing approach. You have to be ready to try a lot of things.
No, it's, I could think of a lot of cases when it comes to business, but also when it comes to personal stuff. As well. And I feel like sometimes it comes down to a self-confidence thing. Like if someone, could be someone's asking someone on a date or whatever, and they get rejected. And it's like, well, you could really internalize that and beat up yourself. Or if someone has maybe self-confidence, it's like, well, they're missing out. Or maybe it's my own fault. I didn't put my best foot forward when I was handling that situation too. I could have done better.
Right. I think the key is all those could be true in one person. That's not one type of person or a different type of person. Everyone's experienced every one of those situations you just described. And I think when you're out there in the world sharing your ideas with people, you have to be ready for any one of those possible scenarios to come up. And the key is to transcend those and not let any kind of a bump kind of, get you down. You have to kind of stay on this path. So I think creative people though, and that can go outside of the realm of work that I do, but they just have to do this. They've decided that they're going to stick their neck out and get it chopped off over and over again. So I think that's just part of it. It's part of the joy of being creative.
Talk about maybe a client situation where, again, like you're creative, you're presenting ideas to clients, and they may just hate it off the bat.
Yeah.
Where was a case, and by the way, if you're listening to the audio, since this is obviously we're talking about design and creativity, we have to show the website. So we're on burnkit.com here. But what was an example or a story you remember where you came in and they just hated it? But you presented it, and maybe you slowly won them over time, because when you present a change, people don't like change. Like you change something that they had to something else.
Right.
They're like, take my glasses. Like I got new glasses. My wife is being nice. She's like, yeah, I like them. I'm like, I know you hate them, because I was used to wearing a different kind for 10 years. And so I guarantee she was nice about it because she's super nice. But inside, she's thinking, this is so weird. I don't like it. It's their natural instinct. So what was the case for you with a client where that happened?
Well, people who can't see, sorry, but the image you have up is some exploration work for electronic arts. And in cases like this, we're looking at new brand concepts and imagining what a brand could be. And so I think the key, and to pick up on what you were saying about people aren't sure about change, or they're skeptical of change, and they should be, is to prepare them for that experience. Part of our job is to create an engaging environment where people realize they're going to be inspired. And you might say something quite literally as, look, when you come in, you're going to see some things you love. You're going to see some things you hate. You're going to see some things that say, Dylan, like, what the hell is this? That's the environment that that's the path we're going down. In initial creative presentations, that's the scenario you want to try and build up, is that this is going to be a moment where we're not asking you to decide on anything. We're asking you to try some things on. Try on that new pair of glasses. Maybe these aren't forever. You could explain to your wife, but I'm trying them on. So it's not a do or die situation.
Like, I don't change glasses every 10 years, so you better like them.
Well, right. So,
or I could say what you say. What you say is probably better, Dylan. So yeah, I should go with that.
That's a high pressure moment for her, because she's got to make a choice, because it's once every 10 years. So even though a brand exercise might only happen once every 10 years for the core brand of an organization, and it is high pressure, I try and lower the stakes at the beginning of the creative process and explain to people that anything goes right now. You can say anything you like. We can take anything back. And what that does is people let their guard down. They start to have some fun with things. They realize they can speak up and they can tell me that they hate something, and I'm not going to fall over. And you start to find out what people are really interested in, and they gravitate towards certain things that they might have never imagined before. So yeah.
What you do is really difficult because it's very subjective. And one thing, you could love it and you bring it in and someone's like, and one thing you do, it looks like, is you create a bunch of options for people. Yes. So like, there's not just one love it or hate it, but there's a bunch of options so they can kind of maybe gravitate towards what they like. But it is difficult because it's subject. It's so, probably the team members disagree, I imagine.
They can. And I think some of what you're saying and some of the images that we share too, and this is a little secret I'll let people in on, is that some of that open-endedness is premeditated. It's part of the process, if you like. But we do have some sense of an outcome that we want sometimes. But what we're trying to do is allow people to follow us through an arc of thinking. So we might go, here's a wild idea, and here's another one. Here's something a little bit closer to home that you might be familiar with. Let's walk through these and see where we feel good about things. And people do that with you. And then they realize that, you know what? This isn't such a subjective process. There is some logic to it. And I can find a way to express what I like about these options, even though I know nothing about design as a professional. Do you see what I mean? I'm trying to provide an opportunity for my clients, and especially when we're talking to, let's say, a director of marketing or a principal of some kind that needs to lead their team through a process like this, to give them the confidence that they could bring a group of people in who might be skeptical in some ways or might have their own preconceived notions about what this is going to be like, and go, wow, that was valuable. We got to talk about some great things, and I think we got somewhere. So it is trying to create a non-subjective environment for people to express what they think about what their brand could be.
We're looking here, if someone is watching the video, we're looking at the burnkit.com, and this is electronic arts, some work that you did for electronic arts.
Yeah.
And we see a bunch of, what is this what was this project about?
This project was called EA Create. And what that is an internal team of thousands of people within the organization in different spots around the globe, and a dozen or more different studios and offices that we needed to brand to create an entity that would have more of a brand cohesion than it did otherwise. So all these disparate studios got to be part of something larger, and it helped them define what their role was within the greater organization. So that's sometimes an important thing to do within a larger organization, is to define groups within, give them their identity, where it's valuable, and helps them do their work better. So yeah, this is a case where EA Create, a simple naming process of giving them something that was distinct within the overarching brand, and then showing how we could articulate how these different offices and studios with different roles and skill sets could come together into something shared. So hence these different graphic C emblems that you see that live in this larger family.
So in this situation, it's interesting because originally when I was looking through this,
yeah,
I was saying, okay, which one's the winner? But it seems like all of them are the winner in the sense of there's this main one on top. If you're looking here, there's like a main one, but then there's divisions, right? So you have create animation, create applied research. So these are actually just, or create capture. These are all winners within the divisions. Is that accurate?
That's right. And I think you're touching on something that was important in this project. That was maybe the underlying subtext. How do we create winners out of all these creative people with their own ideas about what their unique qualities are? How are we going to get them to come together into something? And we did that by allowing them to have their own autonomy through their own unique emblem, even though they shared a typographic structure and they shared a general look and feel. So yeah, it was a process of herding a lot of cats into something cohesive.
What does the creative process look like for you?
Well, we talked a little bit about it. It starts with some discovery sessions, which will sound familiar to people that know something about this field. That's not special, but what we try and do, which I touched on a little bit, is to talk more about the client or the organization or the endeavor that a group is undertaking, then talk about what we do and let's say about design or branding in general. It's really about understanding what are the pain points that this group is having with their brand, what are the misconceptions of the brand that what we do can help rectify, and learning what it is that we're going to take as an approach to get them somewhere further down the road. More often than not, we're working with organizations that are already wildly successful. It's not like only startups and people that are having, businesses that have hit some sort of rocky patch need to rebrand. In fact, the opposite. It's organizations that have done so well that their brand is now miles behind them in terms of where they're going. And so they need to employ a group like us to say, can you get us up to speed? Because we're going here. Those are the kind of projects that are that are great. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we understand what they want to do, what do they feel dragged down by, and then start to take them down that process. So you can see that doesn't sound subjective at all. And that's what I really like to try and create as an environment when we get going. People can say what they think. They don't have to try and say something smart about design. We'll get to that a little bit later. And then when we do get into that, they're prepared to see some of those things we talked about brought to life in a brand exploration, like we were looking at a little bit there, where they can start to weigh in and go, wow, that's what I wanted to articulate all year and I haven't been able to. This is a way we can get somewhere new in terms of the brand. And then we become a little bit more practical at a certain point and start to help them develop certain things like brand items of different kinds, brand guideline systems, websites, et cetera, et cetera. So we do the full kind of brand package in that way. But the process is really one about helping people see that their brand can go somewhere new that's going to reflect where they really intend to go. So
from the discovery process, let's just take, since we're on the electronic arts example.
Yeah.
And you see from the discovery process, going back to literally the drawing board, you obviously created this. These are the end result, right? What we're looking at here. But what did you take back to discover? Where did you start once you did the discovery process and you kind of probably gathered data from the different team members and people? Where did you start with? Because this is the end result of all the work that went up to it.
If you click in, we can start discussing this project. But there are some examples here of some early explorative work that didn't make the cut. And if you go down, we can find those. Those are some early sketches. Right here, you could stop on this carousel a little further down. The one you're just at here. Go back up to this blacker. Yeah, these slides here. Yeah, there's a few here. There's 6 different slides of early explorative work. So you can see here we have a giant crit wall that goes for about 40 feet. And there are all kinds of different ways we could have gone. These are some of those. So if you click the arrow left and right, the 6 slides here, there's all kinds of different
I feel like I'm doing one of those eye tests. It's like, can you see this or this? No,
So keep going here. What else do we got? These are getting more and more, into the weeds here. But that first slide, especially, or this one here, shows that there were many different concepts that we could have taken forward and were considered. The beginning.
This one here is very close to the end one, but this one is not right here.
No, correct. These are different ways we could have approached it, where it became more of a word mark, something that was a little bit more elastic.
This one literally is an eye chart, I think.
That one is.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too off topic, but we are pretty typographic in our approach to a lot of the work we do. And I think that reflects some of our sort of philosophical approach to design. We really are trying to find things that have meaning within the work. We're rarely decorating anything. So if you can find a solution with typography, it's usually a good one. But the first stages are very much about meeting with different people, different groups, getting good input. It's always better to have more input at the beginning than have things come in afterwards. We really try to push to have the ultimate decision makers there at the beginning, rather than at some point far down the line where things have been solidified a little bit more. And then those individuals are like, hey, I didn't hear about this, or that's not what I imagined. So it's much better to have, to beg for a little bit of time from that CEO or whomever to be there in those first meetings, get their input, look them in the eyes, understand what their real concerns are. And then that's so helpful down the line. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. What about mistakes that brands make? Because you go in and you're working on a current existing brand, or you see brands in the wild out there. What are some of the ways or things that you've seen brands in, maybe mistakes or different ways of thinking about it?
I think that, you just showed some exploration, and that we like to do a lot in terms of giving people a lot to look at. But in terms of ultimate outcomes, I think some brand efforts try and do too much with this particular part of their overall business or, organizational strategy. I think brand, and especially our specialty, which is visual identities and how those are representative of organizations, can do certain things very well, but they can't do other things. And so we really try to make a delineation between brand and, let's say, marketing. Brand informs marketing. It's like the thing that holds the center. The brand is the thing that you can attach appendages onto if you have different marketing initiatives and ideas. The brand is what holds that center, but it isn't marketing. They're two distinct things. And so many realize this, but some blur the line, I think, sometimes. And so when they're thinking about making choices about a brand, it can get overly complicated or perhaps overly topical or overly the sense that it needs to change quite often. And I think that can get in the way of a solid and recognizable and valuable brand. So sometimes we ask people to slow down, which surprises some, or to do a little less. So that's something that I think people sometimes make a mistake about, that I need to be wowed at every moment in this experience I'm having with this visual identity, or it's not good enough. And that isn't really the case. What we really try and do is make an impression, and then as quickly as you can, get people onto the content that they intend to consume or to understand. And so it's an ushering in of people to their seats for the main content, which may be the marketing or some other kind of message. But the brand itself is sort of facilitating that beginning of that interaction. It isn't every part of it. You see what I'm trying to describe? I think some people blur those things together. Yeah. So I think some of our work can end up being on the quiet side sometimes. There's a lot of type going on, and it can be strong and bold, but it can be simple too. And I think that's important in all good branding.
What made you, Dylan, at one point decide I'm going to start an agency?
When I was in school, I was in history and classics, especially, and I loved that. I'd been to Greece on an archaeological survey and a dig, and I loved that. And I thought about that, and I thought about art school as well, but that didn't seem as applied enough for me. And I visited a graphic design studio just by chance, just with someone I knew, and it was like, wow, this is an interesting combination of ideas and writing and visuals, which I liked, and put them all together. And then I think soon after I realized there wasn't really anything else I could do like that. I thought that was something that interested me. And so, I worked at a bunch of studios, and then I like that thing that we talked about at the beginning. There's a little bit of that entrepreneurial thing that's in Burnkit. And so, running your own studio is lots of that. So I enjoy that part of it too. That's what got me there. What's kept me here for 20 years, I mean, that's a different story, but that's what started it off. It was a pretty easy choice, I think, because that's how some kind of good choices you make are. I think it was kind of clear, at a certain moment, that this was something I could do well, comparatively to other things I try to do.
How did you come up with the name Burnkit?
My business partner, Josh Dunford, he came up with that name. He was registering some just random URLs in ancient history, and just when that was a thing to do. And Burnkit was one of them. So that ended up being a contender for the brand name of the company. And it doesn't have a real meaning, I guess. I mean, there is something you could attribute it to it, and there's this idea of, something, there's some kind of, there's some heat happening there. There's something to be repaired. There's something, but, and I do like the open-endedness though. It's good. It allows us to kind of be and look however we want.
It's hard to get a domain where if it's two words put together, you can spell them. So it's what's been a milestone? When you look at from starting Burnkit, what's like one of the first milestones? It could be a client milestone, a hiring milestone. What pops out?
I think that, to be honest with you, our mix of clients and the kinds of things we do, we're such omnivores. We work in all different industries. And I think a milestone is that one day it clicked for me was that being an omnivore was actually an asset. And I thought for a long time, we don't really specialize in any one place. And we don't specialize in this industry or that one. And, what really distinguishes us. And then at a certain point, we realized like people were coming to us and working with us when we would go into like wildly different industries that we had no business being in, because they'd seen what we'd done in several other industries and we could apply that to it. And it was fresh there. So this wide net that we threw over 20 years is given us this huge experience, like walking into boardrooms and talking with smart people that I had no business being in, other than that we could do this one thing. And so that was a milestone for me when I realized like that wasn't a negative. I never had to make an excuse for that after that. It became part of what we felt made us able to do that job. We don't know your business perfectly, but we know a lot about many businesses and many kinds of branding approaches. And I think by listening to you, we could figure out something that would be special and unique for this instance too. So yeah, that was a turning point.
I remember listening to a talk by Perry Marshall, and I've had him on the podcast a few times. He wrote the book 80/20 Sales and Marketing. He wrote several other books, but and I don't know if he really this quote attributes to him. Well, I'm sure he may be repeating it, but that often innovation comes from outside industry. So working with different industries, you can kind of, seems like, bring that different thought process into whatever industry you work with.
I believe in that completely. We take most of our inspiration from businesses that we work with. Sometimes they might be in the design space, but it might be in, industrial design or furniture design or architects, or even some of the arts groups that like Ballet BC or Vancouver Art Gallery, Canadian arts groups like that we work with. But rarely other design firms, if you like, or branding companies. That's not really where we're looking for inspiration. I think we've always just been that way. I think that idea of putting two things that are maybe not expected together is where something special happens, something new occurs there, or the potential for that. So that's the way we work, on all levels. And I think that's how we inspire ourselves too, as a group. Like when you get to put your own spin on something that's from outside your genre, that's where you create something new. So I agree with that completely.
There was, before we hit record, you mentioned about classic principles. So I'd love for you to talk about that, but it reminds me, I think one of the examples Perry gives to that innovation comes from outside industry was, he was talking how, when Steve Jobs and the computer, the magnetic charger, he got the idea from, I think, a coffee plug, because they didn't want the coffee to spill over, and so there was like a magnetic something on the coffee. So he took that from outside industry and put it into a charger on the computer. So that just sticks out to me as one of the examples that he shared. But classic principles. Yeah.
Well, I think those are the two things, right? You're talking about like an innovative new idea that doesn't seem to fit, and then classic principles. And I think you use them both at the same time. So by all means, I don't want to come across in any way as a prima donna, because we're not like that. We're very much happy to speak in the language of our clients and to be practical about some of our conceptual work. But I think classic principles are important in terms of typography, in terms of classic graphic design. We make sure that everyone here does their homework and knows the history of great graphic design and what works and what doesn't. And so if you're having those classic principles of great solid typography, excellent presentation, really understanding how layout works and what is the right amount of content and how to get people through content in an efficient way, and then mix that with something innovative and exciting and that's beautiful, that's where you get the best work. So we're getting into the weeds here a little bit about technical aspects, but there is that side of what we do as well. We've talked a lot about big ideas, but there are many instances where we need to then be quite precise about what we do. And just like any, design industry, there are times when you get down to having to know some practical, classic, technical things that have been worked out by others that came before. So yeah, we really are about great type and use of space, and those basic principles are always there. So just to dovetail that into, people often ask me questions about technology and how that's changed the business. And those classic principles still apply. It doesn't matter if you're working, with posters, from the last century, from the turn of the last century, or websites or outdoor or anything. Those principles still apply. They're still good. I think it's important. Keeps dinosaurs like me, doing what I'm doing as well. So
Dylan, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to just point people, they can check out burnkit.com to learn more. More episodes of the podcast as well. Last question is about some of your favorite resources. It could be business books, leadership books. It could be a mentor, whether you know them or not, distant mentor, actual mentor. What are some of your favorite resources that other people should check out?
I'm not sure if I'm going to have the satisfactory answer for you that you want there. I'm really not someone that avidly reads about, let's say, graphic design or branding. I've done that in my past, and I haven't really kept up on what the bestseller list includes of those. I spend more time reading history and spending times with other things than that in terms of that sort of information. My inspirations are really a lot about different design disciplines, architecture, art, technical industries and things like that, and the clients we work with. Not so much about me kind of thinking more about something from a literary perspective in terms of design at this point. So I don't have someone to go to and like someone that they should read right now about this.
Well, it could be like something you drew inspiration from. It could be something in history or biography or something. It doesn't have to be necessarily just business related or graphic design related at all, but something that you just draw inspiration from. Could be anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think I get a lot of inspiration from just this is here. I'll give you a technique rather than a name drop. I try and continually try new things. Like, for instance, music. I'm always adding new kinds of music to my playlist and things I like to listen. And then when I'm brave enough, even play it for others, because I think that type of experience opens your mind to new things. I think you have to continually apply new things to what you're doing. Don't always get the same thing the same way. Don't order the coffee the same way. Don't write in the same kind of notebook all the time. Small changes like that every day keep your brain elastic. And, don't drive to work the same way. Things like that. Walk a different way in your neighborhood and look around and absorb things is kind of part of my daily routine. And so I'm not looking for self-help in books that way, if you get what I'm saying. I might find it in history books or something else. But in terms of how to approach, being creative in any field you're in, I think just making sure you're being creative in your other pursuits as well are going to help you do that. It's just kind of, exercising a muscle.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out burnkit.com, more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Dylan, thanks so much.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed this a lot. It's great. Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.